Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 48 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark. In today's episode, I have a fun chat with Andrea Pearson, who is an author, a marketing guru, and a mother. We talk about how she balances all three roles, about the tools she uses as an author, talk about her fiction, we talk about her marketing advice, and we talk about how she manages to get so much writing done, as well as some of her personal takeaways from a recent conference she has attended. But first, a bit of a personal update. I'm still coming down from weeks of travel to multiple conferences, as well as helping my buddy Sean Costello out at a book launch last week, which was a 6-hour drive away from where I live. I haven't done as much personal writing as I would have liked, but I have made some progress on the print version of the book Killing It On Kobo. So the print version of the 7 Ps of Publishing Success and Killing It on Kobo should start to appear in stores anytime within the next week or so. I've released them both as part of my beta testing of the new draft to digital print distribution option, which is quite amazing actually. The D2D team is still working with early beta users to iron out some bugs and to smooth out the processes before they open it wide and release it to all authors. But I have to say that I'm quite impressed with the overall process of this. What I think I love most about it is that if you have only a front cover image, the process that they've built automatically creates a full cover wrap design for you with the spine calculations based on your page count all figured out. Now, I know how to do this because I taught myself how to do it, and I've been doing full cover design wraps since 2004 using Adobe InDesign. But for the average author, this process is revolutionary and can save significant time and money. And you've got to love whenever a process can save you time and money. Now, I unfortunately have been trying to fight off a bit of a cold that I picked up towards the end of last week, so I haven't been able to record any more of the audiobooks that I had on cue or on slated to do for November. I still, for example, have only recorded the introduction and 2 of the chapters of 7 Ps of Publishing Success. And if you're a patron, you can listen to those well in advance of the audiobook actually being available for sale to the general public. And speaking of patrons, I want to thank existing patrons and remind patrons that I posted more content for you this week, part of which was a short video as part of Patreon's second annual #Thank You Patrons Day, with a bit of a Reader's Digest version of the book, The 7 Ps. I thought that would be a fun thing to share. Just a way to say thanks and to try to share more information with you, the listeners of the show. Now, speaking of audiobooks, this podcast is sponsored by Findaway Voices. I will be using Findaway Voices for a broad and global release of my audiobooks for the 7 Ps of Publishing Success and Killing It on Kobo. Findaway will not only distribute my title to Audible, Apple Audiobooks, Kobo, Google, and hundreds of other retail and library channels, but I'll be in full control of the price for most of these channels. Now, Audible is always the exception because they set their own prices independent of whatever the publisher wants it to be. But it's still great to be in control of the price through most of the retail markets. And I will also be able to sell it direct via the Authors Direct program that Findaway has as well in beta release. And I'm actually going to talk more about the Authors Direct program with Rachel Amphlett in an upcoming episode in just a few weeks on the podcast. But if you want to find out more about Findaway Voices and how you can use their services, you should check out starkreflections.ca/findaway. But that's enough of the advertisements, enough of my personal update. Let's get on to this fascinating chat with Andrea. Hey, Andrea, thanks for being here. Thanks for being on the podcast.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
It feels like it was just a few weeks ago that we were hanging out together in Vegas, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was just a few weeks ago. It might have been a year, but I think it was really actually it was a year ago too.
Was it a year ago too? Yeah.
Oregon.
Oh, that's true. And the year before in Oregon, that's true. And again next year, but we'll get to that. I had the privilege of actually listening to you and your husband earlier today. I was listening to the latest episode of the Self-Published Strong podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and the two of you were chatting about the, I guess, your takeaways from Vegas.
Yeah.
And so you and your husband have been doing this podcast together for how long now?
Almost a year now.
Okay, and what's the that was a different sort of episode because you guys normally focus on.
We do movies, and about once a month or once every 2 months, we do an episode that's devoted entirely to marketing because I'm kind of a marketing obsessed person. So it's my favorite topic.
What was the genesis for you, the two of you getting together to talk about movies? How was that idea born?
So last year, I've always wanted to do a podcast, and we actually talked about starting one about 5 years ago, but we never, and we wanted it to be for authors, but we couldn't figure out what we wanted it to be exactly about. And then last year at the Business Master Class, Joanna Penn was like, no, you're the type of personality, you need to have your own show. You need to go start a podcast. And I've always wanted to do it. So I just thought about it. I talked about it with my husband and with my mom, she's also likes marketing and all that. And just couldn't figure out a topic. And then I was like, wait a second, we're movie buffs. I know there are authors and writers out there who love movies. And I'm like, we talk about them all the time and things that, writers can learn from movies. And so that was pretty much, we decided to start it about a year ago. And then we pre-recorded 10 episodes and then released them all in February and March-ish. And we're just, in every episode we give a motivational quote because one of our philosophies is that it's possible to be successful regardless of background and your, who you are, everything. And I just, some shows are kind of negative about being successful, and so we have a more positive outlook. And then every episode we give either a marketing or a publishing tip. And then, like I said, every month or every 2 months, we do a full episode on marketing.
Okay.
And about once a month, we have guest people who come in and they pick the movie and we talk about them. So like we just did Kevin J. Anderson and he chose Throw Mama from the Train.
Oh, awesome.
Which is such a great movie.
Oh, that is fantastic. I was going to ask what's one of the favorite movies that you guys have talked about so far? Or is it hard?
We like Throw Mama from the Train. We also like Thor Ragnarok and which is one of my favorites. Ones. Yes, I love comedy. But we have done have you seen The Meg yet from the summer?
No, that's not a comedy.
No, it's not. But I love the listeners of my podcast will know I like monsters. I like dinosaurs. Really? We've done all the Jurassic Park movies, every single one of them. I like, things that can destroy people, which is why I write a lot of horror / fantasy. And so, right. We've only done 3 romances and
wow. So how does that tie back to the marketing business? Obviously you have a marketing tip or you have a motivational quote as well. But when you're specifically talking about story and structure and all the things that come into a movie, how does that tie back and how does your audience react to that?
So that was one of the reasons we struggled so much with coming up with a theme was because marketing is my passion and I love it, but I didn't want to necessarily talk about it all the time. And so more than even marketing, we really like movies. And I was like, I want a podcast that mixes 2 things because you need to be a good marketer in order to sell your books, but you need to write good books. If you don't write good books, you can't sell books. And so we wanted to be able to help people through movies, which is our passion, to see, good storylines, good story structure, good character development, what an inciting incident is, climaxes, trifell cycles, things like that. So we wanted to be able to tie the 2 together. And what was your original question?
Well, it's the link, the reaction of the audience.
Oh, yeah.
Who may be coming looking for marketing information. And
yeah. Well, we've had really good reactions so far. My husband and I, it's kind of a comedy episode. We've been told, or a podcast, we've been told multiple times that we have a good blend between comedy and instruction. And so some authors, they don't like that it's not straight information. They don't like the back and forth banter that my husband and I have. And so, but we are finding our niche, people who love movies and who like discussing them and who want to be successful authors. And not every successful author likes movies. And so, so the reaction's it was mixed in the beginning, but now it's been very good. We've got a solid following now.
I guess that happens as the audience normalizes and new people discover it.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. So tell us about your marketing business and the marketing success that you help authors publishing strong with.
Very nice lead in there, Mark. So it's called Self-Published Strong, and it's my school of, marketing classes and things like that. I'll eventually do probably craft classes. I don't know. There's a lot of craft classes available, but that all started out when I first started publishing in 2011. I was a member of a group called Indie Author Hub, and they actually elected me to be their executive director a few years later. But I love sharing and teaching. And so I would hold 4 to 5 conferences a year that were just for our little group of authors. And I would teach them about marketing and, things that come naturally to me that I don't know. It must be inherited because my mom is a marketer and she loves it. And so I would teach them those kinds of things. And then it just got to the point where people wanted me, I was being requested to go to conferences all over. And I was like, most of them weren't, it wasn't plausible for me, especially as we started growing a family. And so my courses, I decided to put courses together because once I do it, the information's there. I don't have to be all over the country, and I can just be like, here, go watch this $25 course, to get the information that's, it's kind of like, it's mostly everywhere. You can go anywhere, you can read, you can listen to podcasts, but it's condensed into one little thing. And so, so that's basically how it evolved, was me wanting to be able to teach people, but unable to be everywhere. And this is why I also don't charge a whole lot for my courses, because I'm not trying to make money. I just want to pay the bills that come from the courses with the courses,
right,
and still be able to teach and help people.
It's like a case of necessity breeds invention. You wanted to help people, but you couldn't be everywhere at all times.
Yeah, especially when I'm pregnant, which I am right now.
Which means you can still help people from afar. Now, you did travel to Vegas recently, but
yeah.
But I think I remember you warned the group that if you get up and leave in the middle of a session, it's not because you're being
not because I'm mad.
You have needs.
Yeah, like either I have to go eat, or I'll puke, or I have to go puke. Which maybe that's a little bit too much to say on a podcast, but morning sickness happens when you're pregnant.
Yeah, these things do happen. It's just natural biology. Exactly.
Yeah.
So how long have you been doing the marketing support? You said you started shortly after 2011.
Yeah. I did a whole bunch of informal ones. I did a couple formal ones, and I charged like $5 for, for people.
Right.
I started, 2011, and then I started getting really serious about them around 2014, 2015, when I started my BookBub Promotions and More Facebook group.
Okay.
And so I would do courses for them that I would record and then charge them $5, to have access to. And then I started the actual teachable courses last year.
Okay. That's great. And so not only do you have these things going on, but you're still writing. And you have a new release coming out very soon, actually, as we speak of this. Can you tell us a little bit about your new release?
So I believe in writing to market, but I have a hard time following it, All of my books are kind of like a mix between fantasy and horror, and I'm a huge Lovecraft fan and M.R. James fan, and so I take a lot of those stories and I just make them my own. But this new release is the 5th book in a series that I've been working on that is technically urban fantasy. It's pretty much all on Earth, but it's based on a magic system that I've created, and the monsters are all my own. Like, I have vampires, but they're fire vampires, so they drain people's blood and then they burn the victim and eat the smoke. And so it's how they survive during the day. Because fire, the sun's made of fire, and so they eat fire, eat smoke, and they're able to be out in the sunlight.
And then it's like using the poison from a snake to have the antidote, right? To create.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's a lot of fun to write those scenes, where they come across the burned corpses and nothing else is in the room is burned, and the cops know, the forensic scientists know the person died in that position.
Oh,
And they're like,
wow.
why isn't anything else burned? And my main
That's
character controls fire. Her job is to stop bullets and explosions and things like that. So the cops, she works, really closely with local agencies, and they're like, what the heck happened? And so it's been a lot of fun. The fifth book, that's the fifth book. And then the sixth book I'm almost done with that right now. And it's coming out about 2 weeks after the next one comes out.
Okay, let's mention the titles in case we've intrigued people that wanted to go search for them.
Let's see. Yeah, the first book in that series is called Shade Amulet, and it is, and this is the way. Just a little side note. It's only on Kindle Unlimited. Once my page reads go down, then I make my books go wide.
Right.
And that's the first book, Shade Amulet, and the fifth book is Forbidden Knowledge. That's the one that's coming out in about a week and a half, and then Demon of Darkness is the one after that.
Cool. That is awesome.
It's fun.
But the question that I'm sure everyone's asking is, you run this marketing business, you are a mother, and you're writing these novels. You're doing 3 full-time jobs already. How do you balance your time? How do you figure that out? Like, does the marketing take away from your writing time? Does things come up as a parent as well? How do you deal with it?
My kids are sick this week, and as we said before we started recording, I'm coming down with it now. But having kids has actually helped me be more structured. Before my first was born, I only wrote and published 3 books, and since she's been born, I've got 51 plus titles now. And so having kids, having kids has actually helped me to be more organized. And I'm a fast typer. I type 150 to 175 words a minute. I broke my finger, though, 2 years ago, so I've been dictating since then. And I can do about 10,000 words in an hour. And so I just dictate an hour a day, and I can do 15-minute segments. I turn on a movie or just put kids down for breakfast. And I'm like, Mommy's going to go talk her books for a minute. And I go in the basement and I dictate for 15 to 20 minutes. And then, they're perfectly happy. When I have a newborn or a baby, it's a little harder. And so sometimes like twice a week, I'll have a babysitter come in for about an hour just so I can get some work done. And I also have a very helpful husband. He's very involved in the business, and he will, send me off to the local grocery store, which has a lounge in it. And I sit and write or edit in that.
You go to the grocery store to write. That's kind of cool. It's like usually it's a coffee shop or a bar or something like that.
Yeah, no, it's the closest thing. It's like about a mile from our house. And so they have a lounge that's upstairs with a view of the whole store. And it's noisy, it's that perfect amount of background noise. And then I just sit and edit in there,
Wow.
So, and I'm a project person. Like I can't write every day. I'm not one of those writers. I do binge projects. And so I'll take a break from writing to do a course or to set up a marketing plan or, whatever. So,
So you're going to fill that, any of those little minutes that you get.
Yeah.
You said something that sparked a question, and I've completely drawn a blank on it, of course, right now. But,
Sorry.
It's okay. When you talk about dictating, I was curious as to what sort of software, what process you use. Are you using like Dragon, or are you getting someone to do the transcriptions? How does that work?
No, only Kevin Anderson has a person to actually do the transcriptions for him and his wife, Rebecca. No, I use Dragon, Naturally Speaking, and I use version 15. And I've got a little lapel mic that I just attach, which you can't see right here. And then I've got a digital recorder it's a Sony. It cost me $45. And then that way I'm not glued to my computer, and I do a lot of pacing. Okay. I pace in the basement back and forth while I'm dictating because movement helps the brain move,
You move like the character sometimes? Do you catch yourself doing that?
No, generally my movement's like I don't even know where I'm walking. I'm just walking, and I usually have a trail that I follow in the basement because, kids' toys. So I'll like make a trail or just follow the exact same footsteps every time. And
oh, wow. Please tell me you're wearing a Fitbit and you're part of a group of where you're challenging it.
Wouldn't that be awesome? No.
Yeah, because Brian Meeks needs someone to really hold him accountable because he's got a high step.
Oh, nice.
So we were together at the WMG Business Master Class in Vegas a few weeks ago. We're going to be instructors at the 2019.
Yeah.
And just before we started recording, we started talking about, reminiscing about the notes we took and all the things, the value that we got from it. What are some of the things? And again, for listeners of the podcast, Andrea and her husband did a fascinating job talking about just four. I believe it was just four of the takeaways from
Yeah.
that you had from the session, and I love that. I was there. I was like, yeah, that was amazing. Oh, I forgot about that, and
Yeah.
so it was great listening to you talk about that because it really sparked things in my mind. But what's something else that you sort of took away from that you didn't get a chance to talk about in your other podcast?
Um, let's see, there's so much, like the whole entire thing. Well, attending last year, it was overwhelming. It was longer and it was farther away from home. And I was very homesick because I've not been away from my husband and kids for more than a day before. And so I'm really glad I went again this year because pretty much everything, they did have a lot of repeat, but everything really sunk in this year. And I mean, let's see, the Business Master Class. There were cash flow presentations, teaching you how to manage your finances successfully as an author, and basically the importance of not going into debt for your business in case, you run into a problem, because author businesses, they go up and down really steeply. And if you're not saving money for when those royalties drop, then you run into problems. You can't run your business anymore if you don't have funds anymore.
Right.
And so that was something that I really appreciated. And then the importance of like working with assistants, hiring people to keep you from burning out. And I do have an assistant, and she has made my life so much easier. She's absolutely wonderful. And I've referred her to a bunch of authors, Kevin, she's one of Kevin's assistants now. But she's absolutely fantastic. And so there's just,
So what does this assistant do for you? Like what are the sorts of tasks that they would take over for you?
So I have her typeset my books. I really enjoy typesetting, but in InDesign, it takes a long time, and I don't have
Oh, you
Vellum.
use InDesign. Okay.
I do. Yeah.
Huh.
I'm an Adobe girl.
Old school. That's how I learned when I first did it in 2004 or whatever.
Yep. We have CS2, InDesign CS2, which was awful. And I do have the cloud version, which is so much better.
I just got the cloud version this year, and yes, you are right. It is so much sweeter.
Anyway, so I have her typeset all of my my print books. I do my own ebooks because it takes me like 2 minutes compared to even the 5 to 10 that Vellum, that she uses. And then I have her plan promotions. So I've got a perma-free book that does really well. It gets accepted regularly by some major promoters. And I just have her make sure that's getting promoted about once a month. And then she sets up my newsletter. I write my newsletter, but I have her upload pictures. I have her upload promotional information, things like that. And then I go in and add captions to the pictures and actually add my email itself. And then I send them. She does my list cleanings for me. We've actually got one going on right now where, she makes sure that, so I don't just delete 1 and 2 star people. I always email them first and say, hey, do you still want to be on my list? And we've had about 200 people say, yes, I read all of your emails. I still want to be on your list. And I have her manage all that,
Okay.
I have her manage polls that I run. She's actually the one who posts my updates on my podcast every week. I tell her what to say, but she does the actual posting. She gets the links together and all that. And if I could outsource, babysitting, things like that, she's absolutely amazing. She's been a lifesaver and a game changer for my business.
Well, that's fantastic. So when did you start working with an assistant?
I've worked with assistants off and on for about 5 years, and they were all awful.
Okay.
Not awful people. Like some of them were relatives, and
It wasn't a good match, right?
Yeah, it wasn't a good match, or they just, because I try to pick people who loved reading and liked my books, but they don't necessarily understand the business itself. And so I was spending a lot of time training, and then I wasn't happy with the results. But I found her another author. Another author friend recommended her back in 2016, or 2017, like probably May or April, and I've been using her ever since then.
And so what is the process like? Do they work for you certain days of the week or just specific tasks? Like how does that get divided up?
I have her do some tasks that I have her do regularly, like she uploads a chapter a day to Wattpad for me. And then she just does random things here and there for me. She has a lot of reminders to remind me to do things because I can't remember everything. And I'm not sure how she schedules her time. I know she works with a bunch of other authors, but she probably has, time blocks set aside for each author, but she gets stuff done. So
Okay. What would you say to an author who says it's too cost prohibitive to hire an assistant?
So this is always my recommendation. When we first started working with her, we couldn't technically afford it. I mean, we had money and personal money that we ended up using for business to pay for her. And we hadn't used personal money in a long time for the business. But I was at the point where my royalties were suffering because I was so busy with being a mom and trying to write more books and basically just trying to keep up with everything, because you just get to the point where you've got too big of a back list and just can't manage everything. And so we borrowed from personal money just to pay for her for the first couple months. And then once she really started, and I really started handing projects off to her, my royalties have gone up quite a bit because now I can do the stuff that matters, you know?
Yeah, you get stuff out of the way so you can actually produce,
Yeah.
which makes a lot of sense. That is fantastic. So, because you spend a lot of time helping authors with marketing and strategy, what's one of the more common things that you find you're having to provide when authors first don't know where to start? Like, how do they get started with marketing? What's sort of a basic level thing that they need to understand?
I usually recommend them start even before they have a book available, start a newsletter list. And then when they have that first book available, make sure they've got a short story to use as a newsletter, sign up incentive and ethical bribe, as they call them. And just because if your newsletter, if you start at the beginning, you'll be much farther ahead of authors who don't have and don't start one until later, because you capture those early readers. And every list, even organic lists, drops about between 14 and 20% of subscribers every year. So, authors need to keep that in mind, that those early readers won't always stick around,
Right.
but it's still important to have one. And once you have that, I mean, it's yours, you own that list. And then once you start releasing, and all authors gradually get faster, then you have that basis and you don't need to, promote as much, and you're not reliant on random readers to post reviews because you've got a newsletter list that can do it for you and things like that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. And then along a similar line, if you could go back in time and you could offer yourself some advice when you were first starting out, what's something that you would want to make sure that young Andrea knew?
Young Andrea. Let's see. Don't stress so much about downloads right then, because a lot of authors, when they first start out, they freak out because their books aren't selling. But when you first start out, your books aren't going to sell. And the problem is if they do sell, then you can't replicate it because you don't know why they sold. And so my advice would be, to myself, we panicked. We were like, we did really well. And then all of a sudden it stopped. What the heck is going on? And that's the ups and downs when you first start are huge. They're very dramatic, or they don't exist at all because nobody knows who you are. And so my recommendation to myself would be, don't stress over it for at least 1 or 2 years, or until you've got 10 books or so out, because at that point you can sustain a reader long enough for them to, bring enough income for you not to be experiencing as many ups and downs and all of that.
Fantastic advice. Thank you, Andrea, for that advice. Thanks for hanging out with me in the podcast. I want you to please let listeners know where they can find out more about you, your marketing services, and your books.
My podcast is free. That's where I always start people. That's called Self-Published Strong. And I also have a group for authors called BookBub Promotions and More. And that's also free. I don't charge people to join on Facebook.
Okay.
And then, my courses, they're on selfpublishedstrongcourses.com. And they range in price from $10 to $50. I even have one that's free that talks about blind testing book covers and descriptions, figuring out if yours are actually working without the readers knowing they're being tested. And then, let's see, email Andrea@selfpublishedstrong.com, or, whatever.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We'll make sure to have links to all those things in the show notes for this episode at starkreflections.ca. Andrea, thanks for hanging out with me. It was great to see you again, even though I won't be for another year till we see each other in person.
Yeah, it was great hanging out with you too. And thanks again for inviting me.
There was something Andrea said that I'd like to pause and reflect on. And it's the time that we waste worrying about those little things. Yes, well, it's important to live in the here and now and bask in the glory of the present, to carpe diem. It's also important to not let those moments overtake our overall well-being. Andrea mentioned offering advice to herself as a beginning writer and suggested not to stress over those daily things, such as perhaps in the early days of a book's release, the lack of sales of a title, or perhaps on the opposite side, the giant sales of that first title, especially compared to the lower sales of the next title. Because sometimes those great sales or those crappy sales are just a fluke that you can't fully control. Andrea suggests that your time would be better spent working on the next book or outlining the next step in your overall marketing strategy, rather than sitting there and looking at your sales dashboard and either celebrating or bemoaning the fact of what you are seeing. It's age-old wisdom, of course, but it's still true. Nothing is going to sell your current book or books like the release of your next book. So your time is better invested working on that. Now, this is not to say that you shouldn't be proud of nor celebrate that first book, because it's quite an accomplishment. Most people say they want to write a book, but most people never write a book, and you have. So it's good to celebrate that and reward yourself for the work you've done. But those precious minutes, hours, and days that you end up just looking at the sales charts and bemoaning or celebrating whatever it is you're doing while you're staring at those sales charts might be time better spent working on the next thing. I'll admit it. I'm guilty of doing it. We all are. We can't help it. As writers, we want that quick dopamine fix of seeing that we sold just one more copy, or just a few more people downloaded that free book that we set up to give away as a funnel into our channel. We want to see if we gathered any more reviews. Heck, I'll admit, earlier this week I saw a tweet from Sherry Bryant commenting that she was halfway through reading Killing It on Kobo and considered it fabulous advice. And in the way that Grinch's heart grew 3 sizes that day, my head likely swelled up to at least 3 sizes upon seeing that tweet from Sherry. Thanks, Sherry. Great to see your tweet if you happen to be listening to the podcast. Now, yes, it was satisfying for me to know that a reader out there was benefiting from what I had written. But I had to use that information. Instead of just sitting there and basking in it and letting my head swell, I wanted to use that information to propel me to consider the content for the next book in the Stark Publishing Solutions series that I have planned for release in February. Thinking about what was it in Killing It on Kobo that she liked that I could also apply and add to the next book. Thinking about that next project, applying that feeling into the next project rather than merely soaking in the glow of that delightful praise. The same thing happens when there's no sales and there's no reviews. When you're looking at your sales dashboard and you're looking at your listing on the retailer sites and you see no action, you see no reviews, no movement. It's temporary. Things change over time. Different titles fall in and out of popularity. Thinking about the long term, working on the next project, those are the real things, the core of what's going to help you get through those dry times. Particularly if you're committed to your writing journey and you're committed to the long term. Well, that's it for this episode of the Stark Reflections podcast. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider leaving a review or sharing it with a writing or publishing friend that you think might enjoy it. Thanks for listening and for hanging out again with me this week. I hope you had as much fun as I did. And until next week, when I'll be chatting with Tommy Ray, a musician and writer, about following his dream of leaving the day job behind and traveling across America to share his music. Here's wishing you great writing and good reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomtech.com.